Jessica Clinton was 68 when her eldest daughter left the 87th voicemail in 3 days. Jessica sat at her kitchen table in Caldwell, Texas, with her phone beside a cold cup of tea. Her daughter was crying so hard that most of the words broke apart, but one sentence came through clearly. "Mom, you can't do this to us." Jessica replayed that line, then drove straight to her attorney's office. She placed her phone on his desk and pressed play. He listened to 11 messages before raising one hand. Then he removed his glasses, looked at her, and said quietly, "They have no claim." Jessica did not cry. She only nodded. Those 4 words ended 42 years of being her family's backup plan. But to understand why, a person had to go back to one Sunday in March, when she asked her children one simple question. Jessica lived in a 3-bedroom house on Pine Street. She had been there for 31 years. The mailbox leaned a little, the sidewalk was cracked, and the magnolia tree dropped leaves every November. The house had been paid off since 2014. Jessica taught 3rd grade for 43 years at Caldwell Elementary. She never made big money, but she used every dollar wisely. She clipped coupons, bought clothes on sale, and drove the same Honda for 14 years. She never spoiled herself. Everything extra went to her children. By retirement, she had saved about $620,000, and the house was worth around $280,000. Her late husband, June Jude, had died 8 years earlier after a long fight with lung cancer. Jessica handled every appointment, every medicine, every sleepless night alone. That was the kind of woman she had always been. Her children had once been the center of her world. Lois, the oldest, was sharp and confident. Jessica drove her hours to debate competitions and cheered until her throat hurt. Roy, the middle child, loved machines. He took apart radios and clocks, then put them back together with a grin. Jessica worked summer classes to pay for his engineering camp. Lucia, the youngest, was gentle and emotional. She said she wanted to be a nurse when she was still a little girl. Years later, when Lucia's son needed heart surgery, Jessica drove through the night and slept in a hospital chair for weeks. She had always been the one who showed up. But now things were different. Lois called once a month. Roy sent short holiday texts. Lucia mostly called when she needed help with her son. Jessica told herself they were just busy, but deep down, she felt the distance growing. The thought that changed everything came during a routine checkup. Dr. Harris looked over Jessica's test results and smiled. "You're in very good shape for your age," she said. Then her expression softened. "Jessica, do you have a care plan if something happens to you?" Jessica gave a small laugh. "I suppose my children would help," she answered. But the words felt uncertain the moment she said them. That night, she sat at her kitchen table and stared out at the yard. What if she fell? What if she broke a hip? Who would come? Who would sit beside her in a hospital waiting room? Her orange cat, Basil, rubbed against her leg, but cats could not dial phones. Jessica realized something painful. When June Jude got sick, she had been the plan. She had never asked whether anyone planned to do the same for her. She had only assumed. That Sunday, Jessica cooked chicken pot pie, set out her mother's blue-rimmed china, and waited. To her surprise, all 3 children came. For 2 hours, it almost felt warm again. After dessert, Jessica folded her hands and said, "I need to ask something. When I get older, if I can't live alone anymore, which one of you will be there for me?" The room fell silent. Roy spoke first. "Mom, I'm 4 hours away." "That's not realistic." Lucia looked at Lois, then said softly, "I don't think I could handle that kind of care." Lois never lifted her eyes from her phone. "Mom, we all have our own lives. You should look into a home." 3 answers. 3 refusals. Jessica did not argue. She simply washed the dishes alone. 3 days later, Lucia forgot her iPad on the counter, and one message on the screen changed everything. Jessica did not plan to look at the iPad. She truly didn't. But the screen lit up, and a message dropped down from the top. The group name read, "Siblings Only." Her hand froze. The message was from Lois, sent the morning before that Sunday dinner. Jessica picked up the iPad slowly. "Whatever you do, don't volunteer for anything," Lois had written. Jessica scrolled. Roy had replied, "What if she asks directly?" Lois answered, "Just say you're busy or too far. She won't push." Lucia added, "I feel bad." Lois replied again, "You'll feel worse changing diapers for 10 years. Then came the final line. "When she goes to a home, we sell the house and split it." 36 messages. A full plan. Jessica placed the iPad back exactly where Lucia left it. Then she walked outside and sat on the porch for 2 hours without moving. That night, Jessica did not cry. She sat in her late husband June Jude's rocking chair and stared at the magnolia tree. Her cat Basil curled into her lap, purring softly. The quiet felt heavy, but also clear. Every question she had been avoiding now had an answer. It was not confusion. It was not busyness. It was intention. Her children had already decided her future without her. They had turned her life into numbers, into property, into something to divide. Jessica stood up after a long time and walked back inside. She opened the filing cabinet in June Jude's old office. At the bottom sat a folder labeled Last Will and Testament. She pulled it out and placed it on the desk. 4 years, she had avoided looking at it. Now she opened it carefully. Then she reached for the phone and called her attorney. Her attorney, Mr. Walker, had handled her family's legal matters for 20 years. He agreed to see her that Thursday morning. When Jessica sat across from him, he studied her face for a moment. "What changed?" he asked. Jessica told him everything. The dinner. The silence. The group chat. The plan to sell her home. Mr. Walker listened without interrupting. Then he folded his hands. "Jessica, under Texas law, your will is entirely your decision," he said. "Your children have no automatic right to your estate." Jessica nodded slowly. "I want to change everything," she said. "All of it." She explained her plan clearly. Every dollar, every account, and her house would go to Meadowbrook Children's Hospital. The same hospital that saved her grandson's life years earlier. Mr. Walker paused. "Are you certain?" he asked. Jessica met his eyes. "I have never been more certain." The documents were ready by Friday. Jessica arrived early, dressed neatly in a blue blouse June Jude once liked. 2 witnesses sat in the room, along with a notary. Mr. Walker read the key section aloud. "I, Jessica Clinton, of sound mind, do hereby leave my entire estate to Meadowbrook Children's Hospital Foundation." The room was silent. Jessica did not hesitate. She signed her name in one steady motion. Mr. Walker nodded and added, "I recommend a mental competency evaluation. It will prevent any future challenges." Jessica agreed immediately. If her children claimed she was confused, she wanted proof to say otherwise. Within 40 minutes, everything was complete. As she walked out of the office, she felt something unexpected. Not sadness. Not anger. Freedom. For the first time in years, her life felt like it belonged to her again. 2 weeks later, Lois invited Jessica to brunch. Her house was large, polished, and carefully arranged. Everything looked perfect. Lois smiled warmly as Jessica walked in. "Mom, we've been thinking," she said, setting down her fork. "Brad and I want to build a space for you here. You won't have to worry about anything." Jessica listened quietly. She noticed the neighbors seated nearby, watching, listening. It felt staged, carefully planned. Jessica understood immediately. This was not kindness. This was preparation. Witnesses. Evidence for later. She sipped her coffee calmly. "That's kind of you to mention," she said softly. Nothing more. She finished her meal, thanked everyone, and left. Back at home, she opened her laptop and searched for flights. Alaska. 2 tickets. One for her, and one for her friend Ruth. Jessica did not tell her children anything. For once, she chose herself first. Jessica packed her suitcase that night. Warm sweaters, comfortable shoes, and a jacket she had bought years ago but never used. It still had the tag. She paused for a moment, holding it in her hands. "About time," she whispered to herself. The next morning, she texted her children in the family group chat. "I'll be traveling for a while. I'll check in when I can." Lois replied immediately. "Traveling where?" Roy sent a thumbs-up emoji. Lucia wrote, "Be safe, Mom Red Heart." Jessica did not answer any of them. She turned off her phone, placed it in her purse, and left for the airport with her friend Ruth. For the first time in decades, she had no one depending on her. No schedule. No obligation. Just a quiet road ahead and a choice she had made for herself. Alaska was nothing like Texas. The air felt sharper, cleaner. Jessica stood on the deck of a boat in Glacier Bay and watched a wall of ice break into the sea. The sound echoed like thunder. She laughed out loud without thinking, and Ruth turned to her, smiling. "There you are," Ruth said. Jessica realized she hadn't laughed like that in years. They traveled slowly, enjoying every moment. Jessica ate food she couldn't pronounce and watched sunsets that stretched across the sky like paintings. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. She did not check her phone. She did not call home. The silence that once felt heavy now felt peaceful. Somewhere along the way, she stopped thinking about what her children might be saying and started thinking about what she wanted next. It was in Portugal, sitting at a small cafe, that Jessica made her decision feel real. She pulled out a postcard and began writing. "Dear Meadowbrook Children's Hospital," she wrote. "Thank you for saving my grandson's life. I want to help you save others." She paused, looking out at the river. She remembered Lucia crying in that hospital hallway years ago, too afraid to stand, while Jessica held everything together. She remembered the doctor's calm voice saying her grandson would live. That moment had changed her forever. Jessica folded the postcard and sealed it. Then she walked to a red mailbox and dropped it in. As it disappeared, she felt something settle deep inside her. This was not revenge. This was purpose. Her life savings would go somewhere that truly mattered. During her travels, Jessica made only one important call. She contacted her attorney from a hotel room overseas. "Everything is secure," he told her. The competency evaluation was complete, confirming she was fully aware and capable when she signed the will. He had also prepared a written statement explaining her decision clearly. "If your children contest, they won't succeed," he said. Jessica listened quietly, then thanked him. After the call, she stepped outside and stood under a wide, open sky. The wind brushed against her face, cool and steady. She realized something simple but powerful. She was no longer waiting for anyone to choose her. She had already chosen herself. And that decision felt stronger than anything she had done before. Jessica returned home 6 months later. The magnolia tree had begun shedding leaves again, just as it always did. Basil greeted her at the door, louder and fatter than before. The house looked exactly the same, but Jessica felt different walking through it. She unpacked slowly, placing photographs from her travels around the living room. Alaska. Portugal. Places she once thought she would never see. That evening, she called her children. Lois answered with a sharp, "We were starting to wonder." Roy simply said, "Oh, you're back." Lucia was the only one who sounded warm. "Welcome home, Mom." Jessica ended the calls quickly. That night, she lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. 6 months gone, and no one had truly noticed. The truth settled quietly. She had been missed only in theory, not in reality. Jessica had been home for 11 days when the shift began. It started quietly, like a rumor moving through walls. At a family birthday gathering, her cousin leaned in and whispered, "I heard you made some big changes." Jessica smiled politely. "Everything is exactly how I want it," she replied. Across the room, Lois froze mid-bite, eyes locked on her. Jessica saw it instantly. The message had traveled. She left early that night, drove home, and turned off her phone. She didn't need to check it. She already knew what was happening. The siblings were talking, planning, reacting. For once, Jessica didn't feel nervous. She felt prepared. Whatever came next, she had already made her decision. And this time, she would not be the one adjusting to keep the peace. The first wave hit the next morning. Lois called 5 times before noon. Roy sent 3 texts. Lucia called once and left a message. Jessica ignored all of them. By evening, the tone changed. Lois's voice grew sharper. "Mom, we need to talk. This isn't okay." Roy followed with, "If this is true, it's not fair." Lucia's message was softer. "Mom, please call me. I just want to understand." Jessica listened to every voicemail, sitting calmly at her kitchen table with a notebook. She wrote down the date, time, and summary of each message. Not one of them asked how she was doing. Not one asked if she needed anything. Every single one circled back to the same thing. The will. The money. The house. Jessica closed the notebook and set it aside. The pattern was clear now. By the second day, the calls turned desperate. Lois cried in one message, then raised her voice in the next. "You can't do this to us." Roy's tone grew defensive. "We never did anything wrong." Lucia sounded torn. "Mom, please, just explain it to me." Jessica sat on her porch that evening, listening to them all. The sun dipped behind the trees, casting long shadows across the yard. Basil rested beside her, warm and steady. She felt something unexpected as she listened. Not guilt. Not anger. Clarity. Her children were not calling because they missed her. They were calling because something they expected was slipping away. Jessica stood up, walked inside, and placed her phone in her purse. The next morning, she drove back to her attorney's office with it. Jessica set her phone on the desk and pressed play. Mr. Walker listened silently. One message. 5:10. He raised his hand after the 11th. Then he removed his glasses and looked directly at her. "They have no claim," he said again, firm and clear. He explained everything in simple terms. "They cannot force inheritance. They cannot demand anything. And these messages help you, not them." He tapped the phone lightly. "This shows their interest is financial, not emotional." Jessica nodded slowly. "Can you send them something official?" she asked. Mr. Walker smiled slightly. "I already prepared it." Certified letters would go out to each of her children, confirming the will was final and warning against harassment. Jessica picked up her phone again. For the first time, it felt light in her hand. The letters arrived by the end of the week. Lois read hers first. She slammed it on the counter, her face tight with anger. Roy opened his and sat quietly for a long time, staring at the words. Lucia cried when she read hers, holding the paper like it might change if she looked long enough. For 2 days, Jessica's phone went completely silent. No calls. No messages. Just stillness. It felt strange at first, then peaceful. She made tea, watered her plants, and sat on the porch watching the evening settle over the neighborhood. The quiet no longer felt like absence. It felt like space. Space to think. Space to breathe. Space to live without waiting for someone else to decide her worth. Thanksgiving came 3 weeks later. Jessica knew they would invite her, and they did. Lois called, her voice carefully softened. "Mom, we want you here. All of us together." Jessica agreed. Not because she felt welcomed, but because she wanted closure. The day before, her friend Ruth stopped by with a bottle of wine. "You know they're planning something, right?" Ruth said. Jessica nodded. "I do." Ruth smiled slightly. "Then I'm coming with you." Jessica didn't argue. Instead, she prepared in her own way. She chose a soft gray sweater from her travels, packed a small photo album into her bag, and reminded herself of one thing. She didn't need to argue. She didn't need to defend herself. The truth was already set. This dinner was not about changing minds. It was about ending something that had already been broken. Lois's house looked perfect, just as always. The table was fully set, candles lit, food arranged carefully. Everyone was there. Roy with his wife. Lucia in the kitchen. Lois and her husband moving around like hosts of a show. Jessica stepped inside with Ruth behind her. Lois's smile tightened slightly at the sight of her guest, but she stepped aside. "Of course," she said. Dinner began with small talk, polite and empty. Jessica noticed the glances being exchanged, the pauses, the tension hiding under every sentence. They were waiting, watching, preparing. Jessica placed her photo album quietly on the side table. She didn't explain it. She didn't need to. She sat calmly, ate her meal, and waited. She had spent years filling silence with words. This time, she let the silence do its work. The moment came after dessert. Lois cleared her throat. "Mom, we need to talk about your decision." Jessica said nothing. Roy leaned forward. "We think you made this choice too quickly." Lucia added softly, "We just want to understand." Jessica folded her hands in her lap. Her voice was calm when she finally spoke. "I made this decision carefully." Lois's tone sharpened. "You're giving everything away. To strangers." Jessica met her eyes. "Not strangers. A hospital that saved my grandson's life." The room went still. Lois opened her mouth, but no words came. Roy looked away. Lucia's eyes filled with tears. Jessica stood up slowly, walked to the side table, and picked up the album. She returned and opened it in front of Lucia. One photo showed her grandson in a hospital bed. The next showed him smiling, alive, in her backyard. Lucia covered her mouth, her shoulders shaking. Roy stared at the table, silent. Lois looked at the photos, then back at Jessica, her expression unreadable. Jessica closed the album gently. "That's why," she said. "That place gave him back to us." The room felt smaller, heavier. No one argued. No one interrupted. Jessica looked at each of them, one by one. "I'm not angry," she said quietly. "I'm just done waiting for something that was never coming." She picked up her bag. Ruth stood beside her without a word. Jessica thanked Lois for the meal and walked toward the door. No one followed. No one stopped her. The silence behind her said more than any argument ever could. As the door closed, Jessica felt something final settle into place. The drive home was quiet. Ruth kept her eyes on the road. "That took strength," she said after a while. Jessica let out a soft breath. "It took time," she replied. That night, Jessica sat on her porch with a cup of tea growing cold in her hands. The air was calm, the street silent. For the first time, the quiet did not feel lonely. It felt earned. Later, she checked her email and found a message from Meadowbrook Children's Hospital. They thanked her for her letter and asked to meet after the new year. Jessica smiled as she read it. This was where her life was moving now. Not backward, not into old expectations, but forward into something meaningful. She closed her laptop and went to bed. And that night, she slept without waking once. The days after Thanksgiving passed quietly. No calls. No messages. Jessica moved through her routine without interruption. She watered her plants, fed Basil, and spent long mornings reading by the window. But beneath the calm, she knew something had shifted on the other side. Lois was not the type to accept loss easily. Roy was likely calculating options. Lucia, Jessica guessed, was the only one truly reflecting. Jessica did not chase any of them. She had done enough chasing in her lifetime. One afternoon, she sat at her kitchen table and wrote in her notebook, "I am not responsible for who they expected me to be." The words felt steady, true. She closed the notebook and smiled faintly. This chapter was no longer about them. It was about her. Lois's reaction came first. Not directly to Jessica, but through others. Stories began to circulate in town. Jessica isn't thinking clearly. Someone must be influencing her. Lois was trying to reshape the narrative. But Caldwell was small, and people knew Jessica. They had seen her teach their children, help their families, stand steady for decades. The rumors did not hold. Meanwhile, Lois's home life began to strain. Her husband questioned the sudden change. "You said everything was certain," he told her one evening. Lois had no answer. The confidence she once carried now felt fragile. Plans she had quietly built around an expected inheritance began to collapse. For the first time, she was not in control of the outcome. Roy's struggle was quieter but deeper. He spent nights staring at his finances, numbers that no longer added up. The future he had imagined, one where help would eventually come, had disappeared. His wife noticed the tension. "Why does your mother's decision affect you this much?" she asked gently. Roy hesitated, then admitted the truth. He had been depending on something that was never promised. Saying it out loud made it real. He stopped arguing. Instead, he began making changes, selling what he could, adjusting his life. It was difficult, but for the first time in years, he was facing his reality without expecting someone else to fix it. Lucia called 2 weeks later. Jessica answered. There was a long pause before Lucia spoke. "Mom, I'm sorry." Her voice was quiet, but sincere. Jessica listened. Lucia continued, "I saw those messages again after Thanksgiving. I didn't stop it. I didn't stand up for you." Jessica closed her eyes briefly. "I know," she said. Another pause. "I'm not asking you to change anything," Lucia added quickly. "I just wanted to say I understand now." Jessica nodded, even though Lucia could not see her. "Understanding is a start," she replied. They spoke for a while longer, not about money, but about life. When the call ended, Jessica felt something soften slightly. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But a door had opened. In January, Jessica drove to Meadowbrook Children's Hospital. The building stood bright and clean, filled with quiet movement and purpose. She met with the foundation director, who walked her through the pediatric wing. Children played with toys, some with bandages, some laughing, all alive. Jessica paused when a small boy waved at her from a wheelchair. She waved back, her chest tightening. Later, in a private office, the director explained what Jessica's future gift would do. Dozens of surgeries. Dozens of families saved from loss. Jessica signed the pledge agreement calmly. "I want it named after my husband and me," she said. "June Jude and Jessica Clinton Fund." The director smiled. "It will change lives," she said. Jessica nodded. For the first time, she felt certain her life's work would continue long after she was gone. February arrived quietly, and with it came a short email from Roy. No long explanation. No excuses. Just 3 lines. "Mom, I'm sorry I wasn't there for you. I should have been better. I'm working on things." Jessica read it twice, then closed her laptop. She didn't rush to reply. She had learned that quick responses often led back to old patterns. Later that evening, she wrote a simple message back. "Thank you for saying that. When you're ready, I'm here." She sent it and set the phone aside. No pressure. No expectations. For the first time, she allowed her children to do the work if they wanted a place in her life. She would not carry that weight alone anymore. Lois called at the end of January, her voice controlled but tense. "I think what you're doing is selfish," she said without greeting. Jessica listened calmly. "Your father worked his whole life too." Jessica placed her book down. "And he told me to spend it on something that matters," she replied. Lois didn't pause. "We're your children. We matter." Jessica nodded slowly, though Lois could not see it. "You do matter," she said. "But mattering and deserving are not the same thing." There was silence on the line. Jessica continued, her tone steady. "If you want a relationship with me, it has to be about more than money. It has to be about showing up." Lois didn't respond. The line went quiet, then disconnected. Jessica did not call back. Life began to take a new shape. Jessica started volunteering at the local library, reading to children every Wednesday afternoon. She sat on a small chair with a book in her hands while a circle of wide-eyed kids listened to every word. "And then the bear said," she paused, lowering her voice, and the children leaned closer. Their laughter filled the room. It reminded her of her classroom days, but without the pressure. Just joy. Just presence. After each session, a few children would hug her before leaving. Jessica walked home those days feeling lighter. She realized something important. She still had so much to give. It just no longer had to go where it wasn't valued. Lucia and her son began visiting every Sunday. No requests. No hidden motives. Just time together. Lucia brought food sometimes, small dishes she had learned to cook. They sat at the kitchen table and talked about simple things. Her son would run outside to the magnolia tree, searching for worms and calling Jessica to come look. One evening, he handed her a drawing. It showed a house, a tree, and a small orange cat sitting beside a woman. "That's you," he said proudly. Jessica smiled and placed it on her fridge. These moments were quiet, but they were real. Lucia didn't ask about the will again. And Jessica didn't bring it up. For now, they were building something new, slowly, without pressure. Spring came early that year. Flowers bloomed along the fence, and the magnolia tree filled with fresh leaves. Jessica spent her mornings on the porch with a cup of tea, watching the neighborhood wake up. She no longer checked her phone constantly. She no longer waited for it to ring. One afternoon, she opened her notebook and wrote, "I spent years waiting for them to come back. Now, I understand I don't need to wait anymore." She closed it and leaned back in her chair. The wind moved gently through the trees. For the first time in a long time, her life felt full without effort. Not because everything was perfect, but because it was finally hers. Jessica's mornings became her favorite time of day. She would sit on the porch with her tea, Basil curled beside her, and watch the light slowly stretch across the street. One morning, her phone buzzed. It was a picture from Lucia. Her grandson had drawn her house again, this time with brighter colors and a bigger smile on the woman sitting outside. Jessica saved the image and stared at it for a while. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. That mattered more. She realized something then. Love didn't need to be loud or frequent. It just needed to be real. And for the first time in years, she was starting to feel that again, even if it came from only one direction. She thought about Jude often. About the life they built, the sacrifices they made, and the promise he left her with. Spend it on something that matters. 4 years, she believed that meant giving everything to her children without question. Now she understood it differently. It meant purpose. It meant impact. It meant making sure that what they worked for continued to do good in the world. She looked at the framed letter from Meadowbrook Children's Hospital hanging on her wall and smiled softly. That decision had not taken anything away from her. It had given her something back. A sense of direction. A sense of peace she had not known she was missing. Lois never called again. The silence between them remained, steady and unchanged. Jessica no longer stood at the door waiting for it to open. If Lois chose to return, she would find it unlocked. But Jessica would not stand there hoping. Roy sent one more message months later, a simple update about his progress. Jessica replied with encouragement. Nothing more. Their relationship was quiet, but it was honest. Lucia continued to visit, slowly rebuilding trust one conversation at a time. Jessica did not rush it. She had learned that real change takes time. And she was finally willing to give that time, not out of obligation, but out of choice. On a warm afternoon in late May, Jessica sat on her porch watching the flowers bloom along the fence. The world felt calm, steady, and clear. She thought about the 87 voicemails she had once saved. The panic, the anger, the desperation in each one. A few weeks earlier, she had deleted them all. She didn't need them anymore. They had served their purpose. They had shown her the truth. Now, she didn't need reminders. She had moved forward. She had built something new. Not perfect, not complete, but real. And that was enough. Jessica Clinton was 68 years old. A retired teacher. a widow, a mother, and a woman who finally chose herself. She changed one line in her will, and it changed everything. Not just for her children, but for her. She no longer measured her worth by what she gave away or how much she endured. She measured it by the life she was living now. Quiet mornings, honest connections, a future that would help others long after she was gone. As she lifted her tea and watched the sun settle over her street, she understood something simple and powerful. Sometimes, the hardest decision you make is the one that finally sets you free. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe and leave a like for us. It means the world to us. Also, share this video to your friends and loved ones and turn on post for notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so.